Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Morton. Thank you for a great show. I hope I'm allowed to suggest one of my own songs. Earlier this year, my band Breidablik released Aldurka. I hope I pronounced those somewhat close. That's Faroese for wave energy. It's an instrumental concept album about waves. I would love to hear a critical reaction to the song Alda. The music is ambient, progressive, electronic. That is an interesting combination. Electronic ambient makes sense, but progressive ambient, I'm excited to check this out. So let's dig into the song Alda. Yeah, we've got a delay on it. And not only a delay, but we have a repeating of the line in a different timbre. Yeah, so we got a nice little canon idea going here. Now, it's really difficult to know where the downbeat is. So I don't know where 1 is, but I do think we are in an 11-beat phrase. Our idea seems to consist of a grouping of 5 and then an extension of that concept with a 6-beat. We have really warm synths coming in underneath, kind of rounding the sound out with foundational stuff. That's nice too. We had our foundational held note right pan last time. We pushed it left pan this time. Very chill, very relaxing. Definitely something I would assume would help with meditation or trances. All the layers coming together, all of them being moving ideas, certainly sort of force them all into the background. Every time we get these series of notes, I try to figure out a time signature based off of them, because they're the only thing that really has large landmarks of beginning points. I would assume they are the beginning of a bar. That would give me a clear one, but I haven't been able to do it yet. It almost feels like there's different phrase lengths for every note in the progression. I like how this piano line has snuck in. Just kind of rose out of nowhere, and the prominent line right now. Pairing the flute with ambient nature sounds. Beautiful idea. I like how we're building an atmosphere here, where the last time we built based off of moving ideas and layering them. This time we're building the atmosphere first, possibly. I'm interested to hear where this goes, if we're going to continue on with ideas like we had previously, or if we're going to stick with just the atmospheric resonance. Very soft attacks on a lot of these. We even heard it in the layered section previously in our and suspended notes. Yeah, there's not really a moment of when notes change. They sort of crossfade into each other, which creates this very mellow, serene evolution of a song rather than a melody. Just like the last transition, we're slowly fading in a new idea. This one being a rhythmic one. And once again, we have a really nice set of layered rhythmic ideas that are some melody is in them, but a lot of it is going to be the rhythmic element of it, much like in our first section. That's going, I assume, is going to bookend the purely atmospheric section we had in the middle. Yeah, this is interesting because up until this point, we really haven't had any strong elements of melody yet. A lot of it has been rhythmic, textural, foundational, chordal, episode have been meandering, exploring a sound, but here we have direction. Yeah, we're in 4/4. I wonder if we've always been in 4/4, but the patterns weren't like 8-beat patterns in isolation, but maybe in compound phrasing. I like that decrescendoing with the quieting hi-hat. Very cool. Yeah, playing around with the volume dial on there. Oh, it's not coming back now. It's kind of fading in and out there. Actually, all of our moving ideas are fading out to bring in a new set. Yeah, this is interesting. So we've gone from just very soothing, calming pads to more aggressive ones. I'm kind of moving, I'm thinking it's more of into a synthwave vibe. See, and there's another 4. It sounds familiar though. I don't know if it is the one we had in the last section, or maybe it's a variation on it, or just a very closely related melody. Yeah, bringing in horns now. Yeah, this is an interesting direction to take this. And we also have more directed note shifts. Much harsher attacks than we've had in the past. This is a very different direction for the song. Sonically, chordally. interestingly, it's almost taken on a call to action vibe. It's not quite on that range of being active yet. It's not an adventurous vibe or anything like that, but it's on the cusp of it. Interesting. We finish it out with something that's almost chiptune in timbre. And like that makes sense to me. Like it's a long outro of I'm going to assume a hyper processed snare, but part of the reverb on it that's compressed down and whatever is very much white noise. And with the rising and falling of volume of our snare hits, it sounded, not the snare hits themselves, which were a bit too aggressive, but the white noise that was paired with it, that was pushed out to the right, sounded like waves gently coming in and leaving. And of course, it's a conceptual album about waves, so it makes sense to end on that. Now, I don't know how lengthy this is going to be. Ambient is not really my cup of tea to begin with. Longtime fans know for multiple reasons. I just need more contrast and dynamic elements and change, and this sits in the same realm as post rock for me, where it just kind of does the same thing for too long. And through that, we really only have 4 parts to talk about, with most of them doing similar or adjacent things anyway. So, musically, despite being 20 minutes, there's, well, comparatively so, not a lot to talk about given the time length. But, let's dive into this and check some of the stuff out. So, aside from our outro, which we're going to get to later, and hopefully I'll have some sort of revelation during this breakdown about, because I honestly don't understand its presence amongst the other 3 sections. But aside from it, we have a section primarily focused on rhythmic ostinatos that I think is designed to introduce a trance-like feeling to the listener. Section 2 is primarily foundational, and section 3 pairs these two together with a melodic component. We kind of explore the 3 types of ambience in here, which I think is very neat. The first ambience is heavily layered, rhythmically unique sections. It's interesting too that we're doing this so close to the Talking Heads, which we checked out on Wednesday, I think that was, because a lot of the cool things that's going on here are the same things I praised from their track that was 40 years ago or whatever. There's some very cool rhythmic ideas on their own, but when you pair them with all the other layers that are in here, you get a very neat concept. And it starts out so simply with just one line. And then you add another that syncopates around this one, and you add another that syncopates around both of those, and you end up kind of getting this triple work out of it, right? You made 3 lines, but you're getting a ton more out of that by combining them. Not only do we have the rhythmic counterpoint in there where all of these sounds are dancing around each other, and we're getting all these unique rhythmic flows by how they interact, because I'm not even sure that they're all on the same phrasing. And we're going to get into that in a second, because there's actually 2 types of loops going on here. But I don't think they're all in the same phrasing, so our accented hits don't always go in the same order with the same distance between them, so it almost feels like an ever-evolving idea. Even though we've only written one loop for each instrument, it ends up filling possibly 60 beats worth of new content, so to speak. New sounds, new syncopations, new relationships between notes and rhythms. It's a really neat side effect of polyrhythmic writing, or well, in this case, it'd be polymetric writing. Polyrhythmic would mean that they all end together and they start together. Um, and that's one of the big benefits of writing polymetric is that you can write a small amount of stuff and fill a very large size, a large amount of bars on the music, with what feels like linear and fresh music. But the other thing that's happening here as well is that if you take just the accented hits in all of these, you actually get a really neat hocket out of it as well. And so it actually creates a fourth level of music that isn't written into any specific part, but comes out of the sum of the three parts played together. It's just a very neat way of doing this, where despite it being ambient, which by nature is repetitious, it feels extremely organic, it feels extremely linear, and it doesn't feel like it gets old. And that's just 3 lines. We also have a ping pong, well, not really ping pong. It starts on the right and ends up on the left and comes back to the right. But the suspended tones, they take up, I'm going to assume, a whole bar. We get a new note every bar, and it kind of gives us our foundational, not chord, but foundational sound for everything else to be reflective of. And like I said, we hear it on one side, and then we end up repeating these same ideas on a different side, again, creating the illusion of newness. You don't actually have to write something new, but it still sounds fresh in the song. This is what I've been talking about forever. You got to work smarter, not harder. There's a lot of ways to reuse what you've written or to write less and get more out of it. Like, there's so many good ways. You don't always have to make something new. And this is a really good showcase of that. Um, And that's just the core stuff right here, which already has a lot of complexity to it, but there's these little ornamental ideas as well, maybe just 3 or 4 notes from what something that sounds like some sort of xylophone, I don't know. Piano gets a few notes over here, and there's a couple bell chimes and like a guitar thing. I don't know. There's a lot of ornamental ideas here. And so despite being, what was this, 8 minutes long, I think, for our first section, you can definitely get into that trance like element because, like I had mentioned during the reaction, with all these moving parts and nothing taking the spotlight, it all just kind of fades into the backgrounds if you want it to, if you're not really paying attention to anything. And I can see a lot of people really getting into meditation to this despite how moving it is. But if you're like me and you're listening intently and trying not to meditate and not to ignore the music but to hyper focus on it, there's plenty of things to hear that are changing and evolving and moving. It is simultaneously static and morphing. It doesn't stand still, but it never changes. It's a fascinating ambient take. Slowly, there's a piano part that starts creeping in. Oh, something before we get into that, I want to talk about this real quick because it will be it will be necessary later to understand this. Well, no. Yes. For the for those suspended notes, like I said, they started off to the right and went to the left and went back to the right. They cross-faded into each other. It was really difficult to pinpoint when the notes changed. Part of that I was looking for because that would be a landmark, trying to find the time signature and phrasing of this entire section to To this moment, I still don't know what time signature we were in, or where one was, or what instrument was dictating the beginning of bars. It was just a flurry of ideas, but this was a point. It's like, yeah, we have, very static changes here, and they're very easy to hear. When one note ends, another begins. That must be a breaking point. That's a pretty big landmark to focus on. But the thing is that there isn't really a clear point where one ends and the next begins. They sort of just crossfade. One comes down in volume, one comes up in volume. There isn't really a stop to one of the hits. Interestingly, much like how I linked this back to Talking Heads from the other day, I can also link this back to Earth from last week, in that I think there's a stretching tool being utilized here. There doesn't have to be. You can easily do this yourself with crossfading. But there's something very specific about the way the notes change that I have heard in my own use of stretching tools. And I am curious if, just for those suspended tones, if they did, just put like four notes back to back and then stretch them until they were the length that they wanted them to be for the song. It's not the only way to do it, of course, but like I said, there's a specific quality in there that makes me think that that's what was done. And of course, when we get to our second section that really focuses on the suspended tones, definitely can hear it in there. Speaking of, we go to the second section, which is just these suspended tones. I found this to be I don't want to be harsh, but the part I was least engaged with. There is a lot less going on here. It is primarily a series of notes that I could find no pattern to, primarily because of how slowly we explored them. It's very possible there was even a smaller phrase. It could have even just been a four-note phrase. And I still did not pick up a repetition to it. It seemed very meandering, much like the first, but where the first provided some sort of change on the micro level, this did not. This was primarily just pure ambience. It was interesting then to try to engage with the emotional aspect of it, and there were some really neat emotions it explored, but overall, I think I still just kind of walked away with a rather chill, laid back kind of calm. A serenity is what overall this section gave me, even if there were micro moments of less positive emotions explored. And of course, this gives way to the third section. And something I want to bring up real quick is that all these sections crossfade into each other in a manner of speaking. Our first to the second is the piano line coming into play, fading in before everything else fades out. It's a really nice sort of foreshadowing. We get an idea of what's to come before we actually get there, and then when our main section fades out, it feels like we never really went anywhere. We just kind of reduced everything except one of the lines, even though that line is relatively new. It recently just snuck in there 4 bars ago. You never even really noticed it, but yeah, it hasn't been there that long. Even though it feels like we just brought everything down but one line, we're building it back up. But it's honestly a transition. A very well thought out type of foreshadowing. And we see this repetition going from section 2 to 3 as well. And 3 to 4. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this sort of crossfade, foreshadowing, introduce the idea coming up in the section you're in, so that when we get to that next section, it already feels natural to be there. It's used repeatedly throughout this, and it's just a phenomenal way, especially with how a lot of this works with the crossfade. It feels natural within the language that's being utilized to transition this way. There's quite a few ways to do smooth transitions, and this one not only works well on its own, but it also blends in with the way that notes are transitioned in some of these sections. So it's just really unified with a lot of the tools that are already being utilized in the track. This third section then brings about a sort of collaboration between the first two. We bring back some elements of those rhythmic layers. We bring back a lot of the atmospheric stuff, not just in a single panned instrument off to the side, but a wider array of synth pads that can sit underneath the melodic layering. And after we get done exploring this for a minute or two, slowly building up the layers and all of that, we bring in, I don't remember what instrument it is. My brain tells me it's some sort of guitar, but I honestly can't remember. It was a center right-ish instrument, kind of high up. It felt above me. And again, y-axis production is something I don't understand. I can't even explain how they do it, but it felt like it was above me. Very cool idea. And we just had a linear melody line. It wasn't an ostinato or a riff like everything else was. It didn't seem to be a pattern to it. It just continued to evolve forward in a way that felt very natural. I'd almost say that it was improvised, possibly. Not that it would always be improvised, but maybe that somebody was noodling around and kept a take of their noodling to save onto this track. It feels very exploratory in a lot of ways. So technically it's composed now, I would say. If they were to play this live, they would play the same thing, but I don't get the feeling that it was composed prior to recording it. If that, I think that's where I'm going with that. But I could be wrong on that. It's just a hunch. Very cool though. And it's interesting how we go from meandering but with energy to meandering calmly, meditating in a sense, trying to remain as motionless as possible, and then move into a sort of direction and meandering with aim, I suppose we could call it, which honestly, that's an oxymoron, right? But it's kind of what it feels like. We continue on with that sort of ambient vibe, the repetition, the exploration of a sound, but we also have something that has momentum and direction to it. It's not looking to stay where it is, it's looking to fully explore the boundaries of its location. It doesn't want to change its location, but it certainly wants to find everything that it can within it. So it is meandering in a sort, and it is also still contained. But it is moving. It's not just full of energy and jittery like we could kind of envision physically the first section. But it's not standing still entirely like our second section. It's a nice middle ground between them. And this trilogy of sections, I think, is phenomenal, exploring multiple ways of approaching ambient sound. Should it be entirely calm and soothing? Should it just be suspended notes? That is ambient, that is calming. What if we had a bunch of layers on that? What if we make something rhythmically complex? Well, that sounds kind of chaotic, but the end result was still soothing and calming, and I called it something that can induce a trance. Well, what if we go into the middle? What if we find something that's not static, but not as chaotic either, as rhythmically interesting? Well, guess what? That's ambient too, and I'd also say it was very soothing and relaxing. This is just a really fantastic, almost an exercise that was given the full attention in production as well to explore multiple ways or an exercise in the exploration of a single sound and multiple ways to represent it. Two ends of a spectrum plus meeting in the middle. And that is why moving to the fourth section felt so weird to me. We introduced it with synthy, compressed, biting tones, that gave way for horns, brass, power. I even went as far as to call this section a call to action. Not quite music for action yet, but definitely rising purpose. Within my metaphor of 3 sections of attempting to find meditation, this could be the refreshment period. You have spent 15 minutes meditating, and now you feel refreshed and ready to take on the world. Or just, get your chores done. Some people need some meditation just to find that motivation. um, but I keep coming back to the idea that this is a concept album of waves, and the final minute of the song is of a snare drum that has been processed to sound like gentle waves going in and out. And while I can certainly hear some elements of applying this narrative representation of waves or even just water and the ocean in general to some of these sections, the calmness of it, the chaotic, rhythmic nature of it, and the place in between where the waves are neither crashing nor simply rolling, but they're moving, they're pulsing. I don't quite get this final one, and I could just be looking at it completely wrong too. Maybe this isn't about personifying or creating music for waves, but creating music that would induce a calm in a person as if they were listening to the white noise of waves, which is also something I suppose that could fall under the umbrella of a conceptual album about waves. But the final section deviates heavily, and I think that's what I want to focus on with that. I'm not saying it's completely out of place. In fact, like I said, within my meditation style or my meditation angle, I found a reason for it to exist. It kind of fits within a narrative I created, but it is a massive shift in style. And I think it's interesting that they went that route. I'm curious what the composer's intent was with it, what story they were trying to tell with that section. And I think that about covers everything. The only thing I didn't really talk about was the flute and the um, nature sounds, but I covered that in the reaction, and I don't really think I had much to add to it in the analysis. I do enjoy it. I think it is a nice way to transition between ideas while still leaning into the whole nature thing, which is, waves and oceans. It's a very natural part of the world. um, so, yeah, those are my thoughts on, I apologize if I messed this up, Breidablik's Alda. What did you think, though? Did you enjoy it or not? Anything that stood out to you? Maybe you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on. Maybe you're the composer or the band and you'd like to let me know what I got right or what I got wrong. Or I asked, about your intent with the final section if you want to pass some of that knowledge my way. I don't know. If you have things you want to say, go ahead and put them in the comments. Above the comment section is a description box, and there's a link for Linktree. Takes you to this menu right here. There's links for everything related to the channel. There's multiple ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord community. You can find the music I've created, so much more. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. All right, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.